All right, this video is a review of Chapter 12, which is Policing in a Multicultural Setting. So, police cannot be effective or even efficient without public support. And earlier in the chapters, we talked about community policing, that whenever you have an issue going on in a neighborhood or a business or with people in general, that can take years, weeks, days to develop, and therefore without the assistance of the public support to solve those issues, it won't get solved. So therefore it is a cornerstone of any good policing department. According to the U.S. Census Bureau in 2010, slightly more than one-third of the United States population reported that their race or ethnicity had something other than non-Hispanic white. Therefore, because of that, and because Asian and Hispanics are the two fastest growing minorities, that police departments have to be understanding of that, have officers that represent that race or ethnicity, and continue to work with different populations. Roughly 104,000 foreigners arrive daily in the United States, so therefore it's important that policing is multicultural and multi-ethnic in order to be successful in what they do. All right, this just kind of goes over some of the numbers and trends, which you can look at and are in your textbook as well. All right, another population that's growing, and this is because of the baby boomers generation, is the elderly. The elderly is a huge part of our population, and a lot of elder abuse goes on. So therefore, police departments must be aware of those populations as well. So diversity is huge, and cultural understandings and understanding languages is huge as well. So therefore, there's a lot of different things that police departments have to be aware of. Another one is mentally ill or the mentally disturbed population. Police officers do get training in it, but they are not experts in it. And so therefore, police departments are starting to answer the call to assist the mentally ill or disturbed population. And one of the ways they're doing that, for example, is Portland Police Bureau. They currently, right now in 2019, have 4 vehicles that have not only officers but have a mental health social service expert as well. So if they have any calls, they not only have an officer there, but they have an expert in the field to assist that person that is mentally ill or mentally disturbed. So this is becoming a trend. It's done in England as well. They have a number of cars that have that as well, because again, police officers are not experts in mentally ill citizens or the mentally disturbed. All right, so we're going to kind of go on between and move on between the police community relations. Again, how important it is to not have the police viewed as adversaries, but more as a partner to what's going on, that we need everybody. It's kind of like a puzzle piece that has a whole bunch of different ends that it's not going to fit unless everybody kind of helps solve that issue. All right, there's lots of differences out there: geography, race, sex, age, social class, but there is also a community rule as far as the law and order that's in that community, and therefore cops are always balancing that. For example, I'll give you an example. One time I went a ride along in Ashland with the Ashland Police Department and an amazing sergeant, and we were watching kind of downtown. We were parked, and there was a mentally ill citizen that was standing on the sidewalk and was kind of moving his arms around, talking to himself, but it was not doing anything to break the law, wasn't harassing anybody, and so the sergeant did not do anything. We were contacted by a number of citizens that said, "Aren't you going to do anything?" The sergeant was great in explaining what I just explained to you, and the citizens weren't too happy. So then the mentally ill person then stepped into traffic, almost got hit, almost caused some accidents. So at this time, due to his safety and the safety of others, the sergeant did go contact the citizen. And at that time, again, about 5 to 10 citizens started yelling at him for harassing the citizen. So what I mean by a balancing act is you're trying to make everybody happy, and unfortunately in policing it just doesn't always happen. So it is a fine balancing act, I have to say. All right, like I said, it's not easy to achieve, but it's something that police departments do consistently. Another example is I know a chief of police that their department uses body cameras, and before that chief will view any of the body cameras, if a citizen says there's an issue, he will call the citizen in, and together, for the first time, that chief will view the video, and this is a smaller department, and so that the citizen knows that, hey, this is the first time I viewed it, you're going to hear an honest response from me, and then they watch the video to see if there's any issues. Was there anything that was done incorrectly, not by policy, or was everything done correctly? And the citizen, the chief talks to the citizen about why that officer did what they did. All right, so there's different relations part of the job. There's a police community relations, a human relations, and then a public relations part as well. All right, we're moving into stereotyping. So this is a tough one. You know, you have stereotyping, and then you have another issue of an implicit bias. There's been studies done that we all do stereotyping. I think it's 3 to 7 seconds that we form an opinion about somebody when we meet them. That's stereotyping. You know, you really have to get to know someone before you can form an opinion about them, but we stereotype depending on someone's race and a whole other characteristics that we see within a few seconds. And that's tough, because one part of training police officers is stereotyping, is saying, okay, if you have certain types of cars on Interstate 5, for example, that drive a certain way, look a certain way, there's a high percentage that there's going to be some types of drugs in them. Or if you have certain people, citizens hanging out in certain areas, then it could be a high probability that they're there for some type of criminal act. So it's a fine balancing act of juggling stereotyping and when it is useful in policing and when it's not. It's a tough act, I got to tell you. All right, so encounters between police and citizens become problematic when impressions that occur are unfamiliar, when people don't understand what's going on. And also, I call the training of an officer, the academy, the hiring, the academy, field training. It takes about 2 years for an officer to get fully trained to know what they're doing, and then I call them a baby officer. I was a baby officer, which means I know the basics. I've been trained, I know the basics, but I still don't know a lot, and I really rely on other officers and my sergeant to really help me make the proper decision in a lot of things. So if it takes 2 years to grow a baby cop, then you can imagine how a lot of citizens don't understand the job of a cop. They haven't been through the training, they don't know. So a lot of times police have to take the time to explain why they're doing what they're doing. All right, police minority encounters. This is another huge thing that hits the media a lot. And it is something that has to be taken seriously by police departments, and officers have to be continually trained in implicit bias and understand that and why it happens and all that. All right, as you know, we have prejudice. I'll give you a second to pause here if you want to go over the definitions for prejudice and discrimination. And what's also called occupational discrimination, which is discrimination that occurs from being a member of a particular work group. So even though an officer might not believe in acting in a discriminatory fashion, his colleagues may exhibit such behavior. And so therefore, police in our society have been an alien force when dealing with blacks or other minority members. Police expend a disproportionate amount of their resources in minority neighborhoods, and that by simply mixing culturally different people together does not resolve the misunderstandings, and there are a lot of them. There's also psychological harassment. It's based on the use of racial slurs and other attempts to embarrass or humiliate members of a minority group. And so therefore, officers really are receiving training and must receive continual training to understand racial slurs, how to use proper forms to address people, to respond rapidly in certain areas, and understanding the Fourth Amendment and stop and frisk as well. All right, this kind of goes into Arab Americans and how they became the focus of police attention after the terrorist acts of 9/11. There was a study completed, and there were a lot of things found from that study, and you can read about this in your textbook. And they found that officers weren't, the study found that they weren't eager to learn from or about Muslims, but they should, because they are Americans, and that we shouldn't automatically assume something because of the terrorist activities that occur. So again, training is huge and must be done in these areas. So this is just more about that study. I'll give you a chance to pause and look at that. All right, there's also legal cynicism, which is a cultural orientation in which the law and the agents of its enforcement are viewed as illegitimate, unresponsive, and ill-equipped to ensure public safety. So there was another study done on this that suggested that race and ethnicity may be more important in a citizen's assessment of police officer demeanor than in performance. So this was important as well. All right, and then finally we go into public relations. And I got to tell you, when I first started in policing, really a public information officer only gave out media releases when there was a major crime, and really policing has changed. Departments are notifying the media whenever there's something good that officers do as well, which is a really positive change, and I'm happy to see. All right, this just goes into public relations. All right, let's go to citizen complaints. So when I became a sergeant and lieutenant, I took a lot of citizen complaints. And citizens should feel free to discuss with the authorities what's going on. I can tell you, majority of the time, officers were doing the right things. It was the citizens who didn't understand why we do the things we do. And I have to say, police departments are getting better publicizing that so that everybody understands, the citizens understand why officers are doing certain things. But a lot of times, a big part of my job was education, which is huge because that goes into a part of the community policing aspect. All right, this just talks a little bit about the police media. I can't talk on this. The police media relations, and that it's so important that police are continually talking with the media to spread the word and educate the public about everything that is going on. The only time this works against police departments is when they're doing an investigation, generally when there's force used or deadly force used, and they can't talk to the media because they haven't done their investigation. But it ends up unfortunately looking like the police have something to hide when they're not. They're doing the investigation, and of course everybody wants answers right then because something's happened, and police can't always give them the answer because that investigation is not done. All right, this just kind of goes into that. Obviously now school resource officer programs are really starting to develop with all of the school shootings, so there's a lot of information on that. All right, there's a lot of other police efforts that go on. I know all different police departments vary in what they do because of what's going on in their specific jurisdiction, and that's really important. I remember one time when I was in our crime prevention division, we had a lot of things happen within our Hispanic community, and so we ended up walking door to door and doing meetings once every Tuesday to really keep the public informed of what's going on. And again, culture diversity and awareness training is so important. Our police department did it quarterly, and accountability is very important as well. All right, now we're moving on to women and minorities in policing. So obviously with the 60s and 70s and the civil rights laws and the new legislative action in the 70s really changed women in policing. Before that, women were kind of doing matronly duties only, wore pencil skirts. And as we learned in the history of policing, that changed, and really the 90s started seeing a difference. It wasn't a huge difference. We only right now have about 2% of police chiefs and sheriffs or top cops are women, and there's only about 12 to 14% women in policing, but it definitely has changed. All right, this just kind of goes over some of the things that have happened with women in policing, which you can slow down at any time. I'll let you read about it because there is a lot. And there needs to be a lot because policing is very multifaceted, and therefore needs all types of people in that job to make sure that women are accepted. All right, again, these are all just studies. This is a really long chapter, and you are more than welcome to pause this and read this more to help you kind of see a review of what this chapter is about. All right, we're going to keep on going, really long. All right, recruiting. So Recruiting is always tough. I teach a class here. It's the first of its kind at a university. It's called Law Enforcement Test Prep. There's a textbook that goes along with that. I highly recommend anybody that's interested, first of all, in a law enforcement career or any criminal justice related career, since you have to fill out an application and have a resume and portfolio and go through an oral board interview and generally a background check, that you take this class, because we're going to talk about how you need to start preparing for it and how you can make yourself one of the top candidates. So it's an amazing class. I offer it in the summer and then once again throughout the year, and I highly recommend it because we go over all these things right here. All right, that's going to conclude this presentation. We'll see you for the next video.